and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you on the theme of plagiarism is an organisational issue. My name is Jack Brazel, and I am the Asia Development Manager for Turnitin. And today I'm here supported by my partner at iGroup. Also, I'd like to thank you for letting me deliver the speech in English. I am taking lessons in Bahasa Indonesia, but I'm not very confident with my Bahasa, so I'd appreciate if you bear with me as I deliver my presentation. I was in the Philippines last week, and one of my reps said, sometimes when I have to speak and listen to English for a long time, I think my nose is going to bleed. So if I see any nosebleeds, I'll be really worried. So today, I actually want to share with you of a past situation that we experienced in my home country, Australia. And I really think that there are some insights that Indonesian university leaders can take on board for the future. As you can see up there, it was the year 2015, and a media company called Fairfax Media were able to investigate a corporate organisation called My Masters. The site was basically very poorly designed, and it leaked all of its data. Basically, it was a business that went out to students and said, hey, you're doing a master's degree? That might be better. Okay, so basically it was an organisation that would pay, students would pay them to write their papers. So all the student names were leaked, all the university details were leaked, and basically we call this business ghostwriting. So the student is submitting a paper they actually didn't write. It's a new type of plagiarism that we have to deal with in Australia. And it showed us some really scary things as a country, and it caused a lot of anxiety. The universities that were affected were some of Australia's leading universities, the crowns of the jewel, the institutes that we're the most proud of. So it was Macquarie University, Newcastle University, UTS, Sydney University, and University of New South Wales. There were some really scary statistics. Basically, this website had been going for 6 months, and they had made 160,000 Australian dollars. And one student had paid up to actually 10,000 AUD. So it was a lot of money. And really what the scary thing for these universities was we use Turnitin. We have policies, we have procedures, we're fine. But actually, they had this case where a lot of students had graduated with papers that weren't theirs. And you can imagine the anxiety for these university leaders was incredibly huge. It was out of this world. It was a new challenge that no one knew about. Now, you guys are leaders of the institutes, whether you're students, whether you sit in the faculty, and you must be thinking, what were the consequences for these institutes? There was, of course, a political response, where the relevant ministers referred this case to the responsible bodies. That was basically your equivalent of Ris Tech Dicti and other government bodies. On a reputation front, some of Australia's most prestigious universities had to do damage control. A task force for academic integrity was launched. And basically the major reason for the cause of these problems was that Turnitin was not being used. The skill set of the lecturers could not identify plagiarized papers. And really the scary thing, these students have already gained jobs. They were in society, they were working, and people had made hiring decisions based on the degrees that they had gained, the reputation of those degrees. Now, I want to draw this back to Indonesia. I've been working on Indonesia for 2 years now, and I really do think that there are some key points that we could perhaps take away. We'll go to the next slide, thanks. And one more. There we go. But I really want to draw to you that We deal with over 15,000 universities across the world. We deal with countries on a national level, and we believe that Indonesia is making great progress with academic integrity. Over the last 2 years, policies have been introduced from Ristek Dikti on research quality, on quality assurance. The needle is moving, but like anything, we must keep on moving further. Being an academic, it means you're relentless in the pursuit of excellence. You guys do not stop, and we must keep on going. But what I see from this lesson in Australia, and what I think Indonesia should pick up in the future, is that I do see a trend of universities making the librarians accountable for academic integrity. And whilst I think that there are some great librarians in Indonesia, and some of them are sitting in this room, I believe that we need to rethink the picture. We need to rethink what is plagiarism and how should we deal with it. And really in this case, what happened was that a degree was awarded, and you guys as the organisation took that risk in the Australian Institute. And what you're saying to the community and all your stakeholders is that we believe this student is competent in the coursework, in the subject matter, and we give them the degree. We give them that reputation because we are the best. In the Australian case, they failed. Their policies, their procedures, everything failed. And that reputational cost was huge. Degrees had to be reducted. Students who had started prestigious graduate programs, so for instance in Australia, the Department of Foreign Affairs, those employees were sacked because they no longer had a degree. But there's a bigger picture. I really want you to think about plagiarism as an issue, and you imagine engineers who plagiarise their way through a course and they've been awarded a degree. Do you want them to build that bridge? Do you want a dental student working on your mouth who's plagiarised his way through? As institutes, you've got such a moral obligation to give graduates a degree who actually deserve it, and you need to have those safeguards in place. Now, I want to bring it back to why I believe using librarians as the main people for academic integrity is flawed. Because with plagiarism, it is an organisational issue. If plagiarism happens, a degree is awarded, your organisation is at risk. The well-being, the financial cost. And in our experience, we believe that librarians are the protectors of organisational resources. They actually don't have the authority to deliver policies that can be followed upon. I believe that sits higher up in the hierarchy. And what we must consider is, how do we deliver policies top down, right through the organisation, that must be followed? Because, like in Australia, policies weren't followed. And when that happened for these Australian universities, the costs were huge. The reductions, the investigations, and now the anxiety. There's a large amount of anxiety in Australia about ghostwriting. How do we deal with it? How do we identify it? How do we work with students? Because this situation taught Australia, we just don't know where these papers are coming from. Turnitin has actually commissioned some research, and we now know that there's towns in Africa who write these papers for students, and they're earning about 5 times the average wage because they're charging students so much. And then the second thing, I suppose, that we see from this case in Australia and what should be applied to Indonesian universities, plagiarism isn't simply, sorry, got a little bit caught. I'll go to the next slide, thank you. There we go. What we've learned over our 2 decades of serving institutes is plagiarism isn't a cheating issue. It isn't a pure heart issue. We believe that it's a symptom of another challenge, that universities have to step up and actually assist in overcoming those. And you can see on that diagram, starting at the top and moving clockwise, some of the skill issues that we need to work on for students is time management. Firstly, a lot of these students, they're busy. They're working full-time as well, they might be studying, they might have children. Time management skills might lead them down that track to thinking, you know what, let me do copy and paste. Let me hire that essay writer. Of course, as technology gets modern, you're going to be doing distance courses and you're going to get a different type of student, a mature student, a student with parents. And those issues might sort of force a student to make a bad decision. And of course, the biggest issue that we see is understanding citation and how do we actually attribute properly in a paper. And of course, paraphrasing is a big understanding that we need to build upon. And of course, the biggest thing is that what we're seeing right across the world is that universities aren't sort of teaching students the art of academic writing and how they can capture upon critical thinking skills and how to produce an original idea. And of course, the biggest challenge across Asia is writing a paper in English. And we see that in the research sector, where obviously you're producing papers for international journals and that's not your native language, which is a huge challenge. But as educators and out of respect to the students, I believe that we really need to ask ourselves, when these plagiarism issues happen, we need to ask what went wrong, what led you down that path to make you think that plagiarizing was required? Where did we fail you? What support could we have provided you to ensure this has never happened again? Now, that sort of concludes my comments on the Australian case and sort of a few lessons learned that we can bring across. Now, moving to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about, obviously, our main product, Turnitin Feedback Studio. So, of course, there are many options. Yeah, and next slide again. There are many options for dealing with plagiarism, but what we do for universities in Indonesia is we give you an indicator of the highest confidence that that the paper is original. So we're going to tackle 3 major plagiarism issues. So of course the first one is research misconduct. Indonesia now has a lot of policies that lecturers must produce papers and get them into really good journals. So we have the Crossref database. So that means if students or lecturers cite or take ideas off other papers, there would be a match against that database. The second one is basically search plagiarism. So basically we do a search plagiarism known as the copy-paste culture that is growing in quite a large amount of frequency, typically more with undergraduate students. To prevent that, we crawl and index 65 billion web pages to encourage original thought and promote proper citation. And of course, the big one, again with students, is we discourage improper collaboration. So we're the only service that has the size to combat the most common form of plagiarism, which is recycled and the shared work between students on the web. So we have 700 million student papers, and that's going to discourage students from improperly sharing work by providing instant matches to the source material. So as you can see up there, 165 million in the Crossref database, 700 million papers in the student database, and then 62 billion web pages. When I started 2 years ago, that web page figure was around 60 billion. So by joining Turnitin, those databases are frequently growing, and you're going to be able to actually have a level of protection for your institute to prevent anything nasty happening. So that concludes my comments on my presentation. Is there any questions at all?